This is me, your host, Vyoma Parihar, and I welcome all of you here at BW People Presents Randstad Leadership Dialogues. Topic for today's discussion is compassionate communication, the key for HR professionals in the new world, in association with BW Business World and Randstad India. Now, to start, I would like to welcome our Chairman and Editor-in-Chief, BW Business World.
Today, when we do this conversation, we're in the backdrop of about 4 months of a new abnormal. All our beliefs have been challenged. I wouldn't say our values have been questioned, but we've thought a lot more about our values. And we've thought about what will take us through these unusual times. I keep saying we are in a 3C economy. A contactless economy, a compassionate economy, and a collaborative economy. Let me add the fourth word is a communicative economy. Today at the BW People Leadership Dialogues in association with Randstad, we are looking at how compassion can really win the talent war, if I may call, or I may call it the talent competition, because again, these unusual times have broken hierarchies. Today, leaders are talking to everyone in their team in spite of the hierarchies. And compassionate communication. Communication was always important. If you're a leader, if you're a CHRO, communication was the most important thing that matters. Adding the word compassion to it makes it even more personal. It makes it more human. And compassion is about feeling the other person's pain. And as Buddha said, if you are compassionate towards others, but if you're not compassionate towards yourself, the compassion cycle is not complete. So today at the Randstad Leadership Dialogues, we have an exciting lineup of HR leaders who bring diversity to this panel. They bring large workforces and they bring diverse sectors. We have an opening keynote from Mr. Paul Dupuy, who is the MD and CEO of Randstad. But most importantly, Mr. Dupuy has just written a book on leadership. And he has his 5 E's, and one of them is empathy. Empathy and compassion go together. So I don't want to stay between you and the keynote speaker for today, but I would say that communication is always important. Compassion was always important. But as a leader, as a CEO, as a CHRO, compassionate communication key to unlocking this COVID lockdown, if I may say. So over to you, Vyoma, and I look forward to a stimulating discussion and learning something new today at the Randstad Leadership Dialogues presented by BW People.
Thank you, Anurag. What a pleasure it is to be here today. This is our inaugural Randstad Leadership Dialogue series, the first in a series, in partnership with BW Business World. And it's in a very important topic today. And I think Anurag did a fine job of kind of laying it out for us, what compassion is all about. I also want to give a warm welcome to our guest panelists who have joined us today. Many on this panel are old friends of mine. It's very interesting. You'll see Manmohan, who's joining us today. I think the last time I saw Manmohan was just before the country went into lockdown at Bangalore Airport as we both returned on a flight from Delhi. And I remember saying farewell to Manmohan at Bangalore Airport, saying, well, let's see how this is going to unfold. Hopefully it'll be over soon. That was way back in early mid-March, Manmohan. And here we are now, several months later. I'd like to look back and just reflect on the journey we've been on here over the past few months. If you think about the process that we've all gone through as leaders, model that we're seeing more and more, it's the 3 R's. First, in crisis, you respond. And the response in this case with COVID was really about moving quickly to ensure that our people were safe. And the CXOs that I've engaged with over the past few months, that's really been their key focus in the first phase. Let's make sure our people are safe. And we did the same thing at Randstad, and I'm sure those of you who are watching this as well went through the same process. Make sure people are in a safe place. The second part of the response was to make sure that they're connected. We now went from the so-called business as usual, working in an office, to being forced to work from home. And that brought along lots of challenges, especially here in India. I'm based in Bangalore, which is arguably one of the more connected cities in India, but at the same time, we face challenges to get all of our colleagues enabled and connected across the 4 corners of India, all the way up to Guwahati down to Kochi. And we did that in 48 hours. And I heard some remarkable stories from companies in India that traditionally were really about presenteeism. It was about reporting to a desk in an office and working in an office that really weren't prepared for this sudden need to work from remote or work from home. And they did it. And it opened up our eyes that we can do this. We can work from remote. And not only that, we can stay connected, we can stay engaged, and we can deliver services to our customers. And of course, collaborate as well. So that's part of the response, also followed up with the engagement piece. And if I look at what I've seen here in India, and certainly around the world of Randstad, where we are 39 countries, there's been all kinds of innovative approaches to engagement. But India, in many ways, is the most creative within Randstad ourselves. But many of the customers, the clients that we work with, some that are on this panel today, of course, really interesting, innovative ways to engage. Not only about fun, but also about being connected and making sure that we're in touch with our people. And to me, that's evidence of compassion. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what compassion means to me, because I've had some very important discoveries as a leader over the past few months, just about the value. So the engagement phase for me was when the wheels really started to move. People were safe, they were connected, they were engaged, and then it was about moving on to the recover phase, the second R. So we had respond, now we're into recover. Recover is really about finding your feet, finding your balance. You know, we had a huge rock dropped in our pond, and then we started to find our legs and find our feet, and then get accustomed to what people started to call the new normal. But I think we all realized very quickly that this is not a new normal. This is absolutely abnormal. It's nothing compared to anything we've had in the past. So it's not familiar. Instead, I would like to call it the new world. We're moving into a new era. It's a new day, and it's a new way, a way of engaging, collaborating, working, giving service, and so on. And so we started to recover. We were not only can our teams be productive in this new world, working from remote, using technology. And in Randstad, we talk about tech for touch, using technology not to replace touch, but to give better touch in this new world. And that's really what the recover phase was all about. And this is where I saw a clear kind of separation with the organizations that took the leading position, that really gained the leading edge. They moved from gloom and doom, and they said, okay, we can do this. We've learned some valuable lessons during this recovery phase. Now let's move to the third R. And that's where organizations are now. Certainly the leading organization across industries in India and beyond. The third R is reimagine. And that's really where we're at now. Reimagining the way we connect, collaborate, the way we engage, of course, the way we deliver, and ultimately the way we lead. And this is where I've made some discoveries as a leader. And I'd like to share some of that with you as well. Like many leaders who are a bit seasoned, I'm over 50, so I can say that I grew up in a generation where the leadership model was competencies, right? Of course, it was about delivering on results. Words like agility started to appear in the leadership assessments, as I'm sure our HR leaders will recall fondly when agility started to come. We heard things like EQ and IQ. EQ was this new innovative way to measure a leader's competency to engage, connect with people, and so on. And then we heard a lot about empathy. And I found that very interesting. I've done some kind of reflections as well about that in recent days. And I even looked up the word empathy because we have our own kind of understanding of what it means. But when you look at the dictionary definition of empathy, it's very interesting. It says, empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Now, the leadership 9-box grid that we've used for years in assessments and so on, we rank leaders on empathy. But you know, what I've discovered in recent months is empathy is not enough. In fact, empathy is quite reactive. And empathy, in fact, doesn't lead to action. What really triggers the action is compassion. So empathy can feed into compassion. But compassion, if you look at the definition, compassion is the sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. There's a key word in there, the desire to alleviate it. The point here is that compassion is about taking action. Empathy is simply a feeling, understanding how someone else is feeling, but not doing anything about it. And I think many of us as leaders were guilty. Empathy was a box that we ticked. We needed to show empathy. We needed to ask how people were doing. And once we did that and we understood, it was less about the actions we took, and was the process of asking and showing interest in the well-being of our people. We're graduating to the next level now. Compassion is more about taking action. And I think that's a question all of us need to ask now, particularly as we move into the new world. What are we doing to ensure our people are safe, are engaged, are connected, and able to shine, to be the best at what they do and in the place where they're working? You know, when I first came to India just over 3 years ago, Anjali, who's my CHR CPO here on the panel, she'll recall this fondly. In my office, a whiteboard. I'm a big believer in whiteboarding. I like to draw, diagrams and come up with ideas and dream and ask what if. And I would typically be in my room with my CFO and the leaders of the businesses. We'd be huddled around the whiteboard, and we'd be drawing up very complex diagrams, then charts, and then we'd come up with algorithms on and metrics on how we were going to drive the business productivity, output, and so on, and deliver on the promise. Anjali would inevitably come in the room and say, Paul, we need to talk about engagement, our engagement survey, our people survey that we do, something we call great conversations. We need to formalize our plan for learning and development, and so on. And I would look at Anjali and say, okay, once I get through the algorithm, we'll get to that, and we would reschedule or schedule it up for next week. I can tell you we've come to the exact opposite scenario. If you walk in my virtual room now with my virtual whiteboard, same thing. You'll see myself and my CFO and our leaders of the businesses gathered around the whiteboard. Big difference is Anjali is in the middle of that huddle, holding the magic marker, and she's drawing the algorithm, the diagram, which is all about engagement, all about caring for our people, all about ensuring that our people have everything they need to be safe and also to shine, to be their best. And that has really changed the conversation, which means the metrics have been flipped to the other side. The metrics are an outcome of having all the stuff I just talked about, the stuff that Anjali is writing on the whiteboard. And we've all come to realize that. To me, that's the big revelation. Now, about compassion, if you think about what compassion really means, it's sympathy, empathy that leads to action. What are we going to do about it? The compassionate leader, to me, is not necessarily someone that lowers the bar on expectations. The compassionate leader is just as strict and fair as he or she would have been before COVID. But the compassionate leader also brings a sense of support, warmth, and a message and a promise that we are with you together on the journey. Again, I think that when we talk about high performance cultures, it is possible to drive a high performance culture in the middle of fear and ambiguity and adversity, like we're seeing with this crisis. And I've seen leaders doing that. And I'm trying hard at Randstad to do, and I must say that we are growing in India. And that's largely because of the response we've taken when we started to introduce compassion into everything we do. So one of the things I urge all leaders to do now is to start your conversations with your people. Not about metrics, not about algorithms, not about productivity and output. Start with, how are you? How are you doing? How are you handling this situation? How's your family? I think it's very important that we begin with a genuine stance of being human. How are our people doing? Because we know that when our people are safe and they feel cared for, they will be more productive. They will shine. And of course, the conversation also needs to finish with a promise of action that, hey, I'm here to support, ready to, to give you whatever you need, and to take action when the need is there, even when it's not asked for. And that's where we see, for example, EAP programs being launched in companies and largely driven by HR. Why? Because HR, in a way, is the chief compassionate officer, has become the chief compassionate officer for many organizations. HR will take a very important role, has already taken an important role, certainly in this crisis. I think IT sprung into action to make sure people that everyone was connected. HR then jumped in and made sure everyone was safe and engaged. And then at the same time, in parallel, started to coach leaders on the importance of compassion in how they lead the organization. When I look at the COVID crisis, there's a mantra that comes to mind. Crisis brings opportunity. As a result of COVID, while there have been tragedies, and we continue to see tragedies. At the same time, crisis brings opportunities for leaders to develop new skills, traits, and muscles. And one muscle is this notion of compassionate leadership, of starting the conversation with human-centric discussions, starting the conversation with care, genuine care, which also leads to action to support. So, Peter Drucker has a wonderful phrase that we've all used for many, many years. It goes like this: culture eats strategy for breakfast. I want to change that on behalf of Peter Drucker and say one of the things we've learned in recent months is that compassion eats strategy for breakfast. I wish everyone stay safe, stay connected, and let's be more compassionate and be focused on moving forward together, shoulder to shoulder. Again, I thank you, Anurag, and the BW Business World team for partnering with us on this very important conversation today. And I look forward to hearing from the perspectives of our HR leaders here who are joining us today. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for this insightful keynote address. Now it's time for us to start our much awaited panel discussion. So everybody, as you all know, the topic is the compassionate communication, and it's time for me to invite our chairs.
First of all, me and Anjali are really looking forward to it, and Anjali will lead it and I'll support it. But I just want to say that a panel discussion is only as good as the quality of the panelists. You use the word star panel loosely, but if you had to really use the word star panel today, it would stick to this panel. So with this introduction, I'll hand it over to Anjali to start it, and I'll be with you, Anjali, in this journey.
Thank you so much, Anurag, and welcome to all the panelists who are there for the discussion today. I'm sure in the audience, everyone is really looking forward to hearing from all of you and the insights that you bring to the table. I think Paul very well said that, it's a combination of empathy and compassion, which is the most important thing in today's world. I think in the new world, what I clearly see that the organizations will have to be on the foundation of empathy and compassion together. Because let's face it, that this pandemic is new to many in the generations today who are actually going to work today. And it's something that has not just hit the professional, but the personal lives of people at the same time, which is something I think even in the financial crisis, we wouldn't have seen so much. So with this, I think it's very important that all of us together build a compassionate organization, which is much more connected than before. So with that, I think let's hear from our panelists. And I think, Priyanka, I'll come to you first to ask you this question. As you know that we are seeing a lot of changes at this moment, and each function is changing dynamically. And we also see that with that, HR as a function is also going through a lot. And we know that digital medium is there in the new world. And so how do you think, and what do you foresee for HR as a fraternity in terms of technology? What are the changes you foresee? And secondly, in ERICSSON as an organization, what is it that you are doing differently than the rest of the organization in terms of really bringing compassionate communication in the disrupted world? So Priyanka, keen to hear from you.
It's a long question, so let me try and break it into parts, but thank you for this opportunity. Couple of things. Number one, you spoke about technology and its role in the changing world. Fortunately, ERICSSON, with technology at our center of our existence, has been on the journey of driving technical transformation and evolution. So we've invested heavily in technology to deliver a world-class employee experience. And that has been something which we've tried to co-create with our employees. Not something we did in the side because we got something which is off the shelf, but technology had to create real-time value for employees and how they experience the association with us, right? And the whole intent was that whatever could have been done by the system or tools should be done in an automated manner, while all of us who are people in HR spend a lot of time creating value of our relationships with our employees. And to me, that investment has really paid off well in the current times, because at this point, more than ever before, employees need a huge amount of, like Paul said and you said, compassion, empathy, communication, and that's going to be the real backbone of how we come over this current hump. I wouldn't even call this a disruption, because it's a seamless transition we are aiming for towards the new normal. And the other thing I would say which really helped us well was a constant investment in a growth mindset. So we've always encouraged leaders to look at every single situation, because the industry we are in, Anjali, We've seen a 2G to a 5G in a series of 10 years, right? So the technology disrupts us constantly. And hence our leaders have been embracing the mindset which clearly says it is an opportunity. And we've seen this pandemic with its own limitations as an opportunity to drive or fast track and accelerate digital transformation. Coming back to the second piece of how do we communicate to our employees, some of the key tenets of our culture have been empathy and humanness, right? And very important that we heard from our employees, which one-time feeling from our employees, what were they experiencing? What did they want from us? What they were not comfortable about, so that we got insights about things that they expected from us. And it was evident that our employees were experiencing a much higher degree of stress than ever before. So realization of that with our leaders was extremely important. And we encouraged our leaders to amplify our culture of empathy and humanness many folds. So that they went out, connected to our employees, gave them reassurance, right? That there was a trust that we are in this together. We are not looking at a situation where it's us versus them. Employees has to feel genuinely supported during this journey. At the same time, trust was also about not just speaking up and sharing their concerns, but also how leaders evolved to become a real partner to the employees, right? Where we're also doing active listening and not just speaking up. And the third thing I would say, we were encouraging real-time speak-up communications, and people could give feedback on what was working well, what wasn't working well. But more importantly, I think what was most important was we created an employee assistance program, which was a 24/7 real-time platform for employees to get any kind of well-being support on physical, financial, social, or emotional, right? 24/7, because we recognize the new normal, we need support for different employees in different shapes and sizes. So how do we clearly exponentially increase our face time with our employees? By creating that platform. So Anjali, just to answer your question, empathy and humanness became the backbone of how we connected to our employees, but the clear culture expected on how we deliver was cooperation and collaboration. So we're very clear to our employees, there's not going to be an individual success that we go after. We go with a very collaborative and cooperative ways of working, while we both listen up and speak up as leaders.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. I think I take away mindset that we are kind of creating in the organization and being one organization as a key takeaway from your conversation. Great. Thank you for the insights. Over to you, Anurag.
All this existed before COVID. It's just that communication has become more listening. I think that was because the hallmark of compassion is to be able to listen what is said and what is not unsaid, what is unsaid. Now let me go to Mr. SOIN. HARSHVENDRA, you run a very large HR team. You lead a very large workforce for their HR and marketing. Now, how does the advent of new technologies impact your engagement in communication? How does it aid you? How does it help you? And because we're talking about compassion and communication, how has this technology enablement more than ever help you to effectively communicate with the stakeholders, with the employees, and really practice compassionate communication?
That's a great question, Anurag, as always. And let me start by saying that, yes, when you are 130,000 employees across 100 countries, clearly compassionate communication and leadership is really the key. A, to stay connected, and two, to communicate well. For us, it's important to make sure that the employee doesn't become a number. So the first thing that you have to enable is that what we call human experiences through treating everybody as what we call N:1, which means personalized communication despite the number. Paul talked about it. For us, technology is a great enabler, but moments of truth remain human. And therefore, for us to even reach people, to talk to them compassionately, to make sure that we address their psychological safety, their physical safety compassionately, we have to use technology to reach out effectively. Now, clearly, there are many examples that we have done, but there are also some challenges. When you use technology to communicate in a pandemic-like situation, you obviously have to make sure that, make sure that people are geared up to accept whether it needs reskilling or upskilling. To use these technology tools and to make them effective is not going to be easy. But I'll give you a few examples where without technology, it would have been impossible to communicate with our people and communicate effectively. So we used many tools. You're all aware of our humanoid, which is the K2 humanoid that is in our offices. Now, throughout COVID, because obviously a humanoid is, doesn't have any risk of getting, any disease, 24/7 people could call and ask their queries. And remember, especially when people are stranded across the world, not knowing what the situation is, they needed somebody. They needed somebody 24/7. We also had many apps which provided touchless experience and safety to people and showed our compassion. Compassion, I was Googling as you were speaking, is when you sympathize. And of course, the opposite of compassion is indifference, so we don't want indifference. We have apps like the AI coach. An AI coach is a tool that we use where people actually can connect with each other. It analyzes frequency of communication, tone of communication, and also coaches you in areas that you want online. We have many voice-enabled facial recognition systems which make sure that people are safe. It's used for, since it's voice-enabled, it can use for communication and also for attendance and other areas, so you don't have to really swipe any cards in our offices. There is technology used for making sure that, we have chatbots. One of our biggest chatbots is called Yugo, which can do everything from applying your leaves to doing first-level recruitment to even filing your bills, etc. There is a tool called Tech Mighty, very interesting. The T is with a TEA. Clearly, make sure that it's an AI-driven tool which randomly connects to people in today's pandemic age and invites them to a virtual tea session. Now, the problem is today, we only communicate with people we know. But with an AI algorithm, what we make sure is people across the world stay connected, and we can show our compassion through the various policies and processes that we have. I think the challenge today is that employees are confused, they are anxious, employees are uneasy and worn down. So communication has to be factual, not speculative. Communication has to be clear, positive. And of course, one important thing is we must give a chance to people to connect, but we must give chance to people to grieve in today's situation. And I think we use technology to reach out because 100 countries, people dispersed, and families dispersed. We use technology to make sure it's consistent, effective, and the feedback mechanism in the loop is also effective. So a compassionate communication ends with an effective feedback and loop, which if it's manual, you can lose the essence of what it is. However, as I said, I will close by saying technology is an enabler, movements of truth are yet human. So we must not forget that the reason to use technology is to deliver high touch. And it's not something just for the sake of using an AR/VR tool, but a high-tech enablement of a high-touch scenario. So that's what I think we are doing in a big way, very passionately. We call it human experiences at Tech Mahindra, and that's something that we are very passionate about.
Thank you, HARSHVENDRA. Human experiences getting enhanced through technology is the way forward. And as you rightly said, the opposite of compassion is indifference or apathy.
So you spoke a lot about how technology really is playing a big role in ensuring high touch. So Arun, my question to you is that, do you see that with this technology, do you see that there is a divide that is being created between people? And do you see that this is going to hamper employee relationship and culture to some extent? And considering the sensitivity of communication, especially in the virtual world where we are all working from home, how do you think what is your organization doing to keep your employees stay motivated during these times?
So I'm going to borrow a few things from what Harsh said and some of the previous pieces of information that Paul and Anurag said. And the one thing that struck me was the who decides the frontier? Does technology decide frontiers, or does human mind explore new frontiers? And as Harsh was speaking and about that final moment that matters is the human touch, I was kind of beginning to think that perhaps the technology that we have created takes us to a particular level, but it's the human mind that can explore things beyond that. And therefore, I personally believe that technology is really not a divider. On the contrary, technology is an integrator. It is for us to kind of believe that we can leverage technology to achieve what we have set out for. In that sense, I see technology as a pure enabler. Perhaps it places people on a continuum of comfort. Some people take to technology as fish takes to water, and some people like me are more challenged. But nonetheless, I think today's workforce has adapted to technology, and therefore, while, like I said, they could be at different points in the continuum of comfort, I do not see technology as a differentiator and as a divider. That's very important for us to believe, because that will set the bedrock of the level of experimentation we will do with technology. If we start believing that technology is a divider, then there would be some naysayers, some agnostics who might kind of dilute the agenda. Therefore, it is very important for us to have that conviction that technology is actually an integrator. And that's the reason why I spend so much time on this particular parameter. I think there is no doubt that virtual communications have brought in a level of complexity that we people were not used to. It was like, for instance, if I take my own example, I would always prefer a face-to-face communication, a moment of chai time with people, whether it is in my office or whether I walk people to the cafeteria, or even if I don't smoke, walk down with a business leader who wants to take that fact break, because that's so much of valuable time for me, one-on-one with that person. And that's not available to me. So there is that complexity. But I think it is for us to use this opportunity to have meaningful conversations and see how do we kind of place them in our working agenda. And as people were speaking, I went and suddenly that 4 W's and 1 H kind of struck me. Okay, and that's a universal thumb rule of how you look at communication. And I suddenly felt that this compassionate communication can be structured around not only the what, but the when and the how. Okay, because one of the things, and Harsh talked about, and I'm sorry, Harsh, that I'm kind of picking on what you said, because there were so many simplistic nuggets that you kind of placed in your narration that I feel compelled to kind of feed off that. The when becomes a very, very integral part, because people have suddenly seen an elongation of their workday. Okay, and Priyanka also mentioned about this, about the burnout that kind of bubbled up in the pulse surveys and stuff like that. And that's because people are still adapting to this new paradigm, where they still are yet to kind of differentiate between what could have been a work time and what is their personal time. And that's kind of leading to a lot of stress in people. And therefore, one of the things that I believe should be an integral part of defining a compassionate communication agenda for organizations is defining the whens. Allow people the flexibility to choose their work day, if I may. Okay, of course there need to be overlaps, but I think believing that somebody is in front of the machine and therefore, or has got the machine at home and therefore is available 24/7 is, I think, it could be a pitfall in employee health and well-being and organizational health. And therefore, it is very important that the when is taken care of, and the how. And the how is kind of taking off this empathy and compassion and stuff like that. Okay, these are two very, very important pieces. And I, for one, believe that it is not just the HR people who are custodians of this. Because the industry that we are in today, I think the managers are as much HR people in terms of driving this agenda forward. And therefore, there is a need for us to coach the managers who in Paul's words, when they were caught up in that respond phase, when it was important to keep the lights on, not to ensure that we miss on SLAs, I think many industries, and especially I'm so proud to be part of the IT's industry today, that we have not failed the world. We have kept up our SLAs. We have kept the lights running for our clients. And it was possible because of the entire workforce, because of the technology backbone that India has been able to create. But I think it is time for us to kind of step back and ensure that now we give the people emotions the place it deserves. Okay, and that was a recover phase that Paul kind of briefly alluded to. I think that requires coaching. It's so easy to be task oriented, but to let the people orientation step up one level on top of the task orientation calls for a little bit of repositioning of people's minds and psyches. And you said, what do we do in the company that I work for? I think we have started this journey of coaching managers to become sensitive to this need, to make it a point that while work needs to get done, that people is not at the cost of what is deliverable to the client, but people is an agenda in itself. Okay, so have these non-agenda based conversations, ask about the well-being. So coaching around that, making those conversations more purposeful, not trivial, because it can be so, there is a risk of that becoming again a check in the box. But how do you invest? And that's where that authenticity kind of comes in. So coaching people to become authentic as they let the people agenda surface, bubble up, and take a level of priority that it deserves. And secondly, there's also an element of coaching for the rank and file of the organization, that it is important for them now more than ever to become slightly assertive in what they need. There has to be a little bit of pushback and what they can do and what they cannot do in terms of accommodating times, because calendars seem like skyscrapers today. They just kind of keep popping up every now and then, and there is a need for people to kind of push back and say this is possible and this is not possible. In fact, we went a step further ahead and we actually cajoled people to see if they could take a few days off now and then to recharge, because historically over the last 10 odd years that I've been in the IT industry, people felt that work from home was a substitute for managing personal work along with work deliverables. Okay, and today suddenly they find a situation where this entire thing is kind of eating into their own emotional stability. Therefore, we said it does not mean that if you take a paid time off, you need to go out with family, you need to go watch a movie. It is important for you to sit, reflect, recharge, rejuvenate, and then come back the next day. So that's again something that we have started in this organization, where we're cajoling people to be conscious about this potential burnout, take their days off, recharge, and then come back to work. But all in all, exciting times, very challenging times. And after a long time, I felt that we got a great opportunity to contribute to business functions and get that central piece in the piece of action. Thank you so much for putting that question across to me, Anjali. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Arun. I pick up technology as an integrator and line managers as people managers and HR managers, right? Thanks for the insights, Arun. Back to you, Anurag.
Anjali and Paul, I'm thinking, why have we called this session compassionate communication? Communication is always supposed to be compassionate. Otherwise, it's not communication, right? And, any human interaction needs to be compassionate. And dare I say, talking to my friends who are CHROs, some of my batchmates from the business school who've grown in that function, they genuinely feel that they have their function is getting the due recognition and the due importance. And really, we've been talking about how many CHROs are on the board. Today, they feel they are on the decision-making table with the CEO on every strategic initiative, and of course on tactical initiatives. That may happen in some organizations, but for some organizations, it is the first time, as Arun rightly said, that HR is getting its due importance. Coming to you, Sudipto, again, Arun alluded to it, that some people are tech savvy and some people aren't tech savvy. Some people are not digital natives. Some people do not like the technology experience. So do you think COVID is creating hurdles for compassionate communication? Because there is a digital divide, both in terms of skills and in terms of, your aversion to technology. So tell us, is there a new skill that is needed? Is there a new etiquette that is needed? Is there a new mindset that is needed to do compassionate communication in this new abnormal world?
Anurag, I think I see it the other way around. I see it's an opportunity. Okay, so opportunity from the point of view of employees and also opportunity from the point of view of HR and management per se. And we have to also be conscious of the fact that, that digital savviness is also to do with the kind of, or the nature of industry you are in. So for example, that Arun just talked about the software industry where probably digital savviness, by the nature of the job, it is already there. And if you really look at our kind of an industry, which is a cement, which is very manufacturing based, the profile of people is such that they may not have experienced this kind of requirement to be digitally savvy before. But I think this is an opportunity where business is also understanding, so our employees, that the tech savviness is going to help. And of course, there's a skill gap. And that's one opportunity for HR to see that how do I upskill my people? How do I, make them more comfortable to use some of those technologies? But on the other hand, you have to also understand that it is an opportunity for HR to say that, under these current circumstances where people are kind of forced to be digitally savvy, at least many of them, so tremendous amount of stress also comes in, right, among the employees. And that's where I think this being compassionate to employees, I'm not saying just communication, is very important. That how do you, as an HR, use your core skill and help the employees out. I think this is as we find more and more technologies coming in, and that will have not just because of the COVID. I think there are a lot of stress that will coming in even otherwise, and that's where HR has to find out that opportunity to be the real HR, be human and compassionate. And I think there's another important point is also to do with the mindset. The mindset of people, both from the employee's point of view and also from the leader's point of view, is very important. That how do I adapt to this new situation which COVID kind of forced you to be in? And for the leaders, I think in our kind of industry, many leaders, they haven't really thought of working from home using a kind of virtual, network. But this situation is forcing them to see that this is working well. And, for many years, we have been hearing theories like ROWE, result only work environment, right? And many traditional industries, they couldn't get into ROWE model before because they had another option. But today we don't have option. We have to get the best out of the current situation. And this is the right time even for ROWE model to be implemented in its full spirit. So there are a lot of kind of opportunities, I would say, that which this new situation has brought in.
My next question is for Raj, and I'm very eager to actually hear from him because we know that aviation as an industry definitely got the most impacted during this time, especially because of the unexpected slowdown and travel bans across. So and we also know that there are some tough conversations also as HR professionals that we have to do, and we have to partner with our people around that. So what are you, Raj, doing in your organization to really ensure the balance between the communication and ensuring that the communication as such kind of takes care of the employees and helps them stay stronger together in the current time?
No, absolutely, you're right, Anjali. Aviation, along with hospitality, entertainment, all of us got the wrong end of the stick. For 2 months there were no revenues for 5 days in March, all of April, and most of May. And as you're probably aware, aviation has a fairly high fixed cost. And our fixed cost at INDIGO was about 40 crores a day, pre-COVID days. And when you have absolutely no revenues coming in, you're looking at an expense of in 2 months of about 2,500 crores with absolutely no money coming in. So it was indeed difficult, and thankfully late May we started flying again, and even now we are only doing about 30% of our production capacity. So these are certainly not easy days. But at Indigo, we believe if just a few aviation companies have to survive, we'll be one of them. That said, from a communication standpoint, for both Rono Datta, who's our CEO, and I, there are several stakeholders, of which I think two of them are fairly important. One is the board and the various committees of the board, which also includes the promoters, and number two, the employees. And just so you know, our board is a very active board, but it's a very management-run company. So we have the chairman of the board, who's a stellar individual. We have a 9-member board, but the management pretty much runs the company. But it is very important for Rono and I to communicate with the board as much as we communicate with the employees, because at the end of the day, shareholders are very keen to know what are we doing in these terms of the pandemic. So for us, the communication with the board is more or less factual. You're talking about the realities of the aviation industry. You're talking about the reality of where we are, how we are conserving cash, and yet continuing to keep employee engagement as a predominant part of our communication. The second one is employees, and to communicate with employees is very, very important. Much like Sudipto said, we are not an industry that can work virtually. Imagine the pilot, says when you're all sitting in an airplane, fantastic, have a great flight, I'm working virtually from home today. That's not something that's ever going to happen. About 95% of my employees don't have the luxury of working from home. Although with only 30% of production capacity, we need to communicate, and not all of them are there. So for Rono and me, the communication with the employee is a combination of factual communication and what I call compassionate communication. And facts are what? Facts are real facts, and our employees know as much as everybody else do that these are trying times, and Rono is a fantastic communicator, and I think between the two of us, we continue to communicate in our own manner, which I think shows a couple of things. It shows our vulnerabilities as well, and it also shows our empathy and of course compassion. And when Rono wrote his email to employees, and when he had his virtual town hall, he talked about how his young grandson, who was a 2-year-old little boy in New York, was having fever. And those days, those are the times when New York was very heavily hit by COVID. And you won't imagine the amount of messages he got. In fact, a lot of people also asked me to message on to him. And to show that compassion is, and also to show that he was as human as anyone else. And in this process, we did a bunch of things. We announced pay cuts in the month of March, but we kind of rolled it back in April because the government didn't want us to do it. And in the month of May, we did a pay cut. And when things got worse, we also announced what we called a leave without pay program. And of course, we did have a very specific approach towards performance and communication around performance and all of that. It was very personalized, as I said. Much like what Priyanka was saying, we also have a program where we seek employee pulse on a continuous basis. And I learned this when I was in my Amazon days, where we said there's no point just checking with employees once in a year. You need to do it continuously. So our program is called 6E Speaks, and 6E is our code, and you can also call it sexy or whichever way it works. And the intent is for us to ask specific questions. And we also have a NPS question, much like our customers rate us on an NPS question. We have a employee NPS as well. So for the first time in January, we asked the employee NPS question, and our NPS numbers were in the late 30s, 38, 39. which was considered reasonably decent. And the second set of NPS question, the second NPS question I asked was in the month of June, and our NPS numbers had gone up to mid-70s. This is in spite of the fact that we had pay cuts, we had leave without pay, we had performance programs and all of that. And I think to my mind, it's probably a lot to do with how well we communicated. And we told employees, you are as much a part of the stakeholders of the company. You know, we need to be all in it together. And of course, you know, when the airport operations began, there was a lot of skepticism. I mean, even today there is skepticism. Customer behavior is going to determine how this industry is going to come back in. And by customer behavior, I mean, is there a willingness on my part to go do flights like the way I used to do? So communicating with customers was also important. So we now talk about the HEPA filters in our airplanes, which continuously brings in fresh air. And we basically tell customers as much as our employees that if at all you need to be worried, it's the last place we want you to be worried about your health is in the airplane. So for the employees, we basically didn't stop with just sermonizing, and compassion doesn't mean you just sermonize, but also facts. And of course, we did our bit in terms of PPE kits. And if you see some of our cabin staff, they all look like astronauts, and they need to just throw it away. And this is hot times of the year, like you're in cold, you know, environment inside the plane, and the moment you come out, it's really warm, and our people are carrying on with it very, very well. And I think it's a lot to do with humane communication, which is coupled with facts, because you don't want to be hiding and saying everything is hunky-dory when it really is not. I think it's a combination of all of these. Anjali.
Thank you so much, Raj. I think the confidence in the strategy of the organization and the capability to be vulnerable as leaders, I think, is definitely driving Indigo into the NPS scores that you've been seeing. Thank you for the insights. Over to you, Anurag.